GM has recently announced an electric version of the Hummer in a rather laughable announcement video. And that announcement video is pretty much a collection of cliches. However, the vehicle does actually look pretty decent. So I'm going to go over my thoughts about it based on the announcement that we have so far. And admittedly, we don't have that many details at the moment, other than this pretty hilarious announcement video, which I have to assume was purely tongue-in-cheek, given the voiceover and given the graphics. Alright, so what do we know about the car so far? Basically what we know is Hummer has been a brand that's been around forever. It's iconic, it's well recognized, however it is super polarizing. I'm personally not a fan of it historically, but the EV is actually pretty decent, and there's an increasing demand for a lot of these super utility vehicles. In Australia we'd call these utes, of course, but just in the US they'd be trucks, so super trucks, whatever you want to call them. There's an increasing demand for them, and I think some of them are pretty cool. So the Raptor is kind of cool. I actually really like the LM002, although obviously that's not really a current car. Alright, so back onto the Hummer EV. Basically it looks like Hummers usually look, that it looks a little bit more streamlined. The information we have at the moment is Hummer's really marketing this in terms of power and off-road capability. So the power is pretty impressive. 1,000 horsepower, 11,500 pound-feet of torque. That looks pretty impressive. In terms of the acceleration times, they're claiming it will do 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 3 seconds. It does, however, remain to be seen whether that's actually matched, and also what its acceleration time is to higher speeds, which is really going to give you an idea of how it does when it's accelerating through traffic. So basically, so far, performance looks impressive, but obviously it's a big car, handling is going to be an issue. In terms of the ease of handling, we don't really know at the moment, but it looks like it could be a little bit unwieldy, but they've taken steps to mitigate this. Part of this is in terms of rear-wheel steering, which is going to help a lot. Another part of it comes in the form of tech. So in traffic-related things, they have electronic gizmos, for want of a better word, that enable it to navigate through traffic without your need for input necessarily. It also looks like they've come up with some additional ways to improve the handling and improve its general usability. So its general charging, we don't know exactly how long it will take to charge, but they're purporting that it will have around 350 miles of range. However, when it's taken off-road, this is probably going to decline significantly. So I wouldn't necessarily count on getting 350 miles of range, accelerating from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds and taking it on steep hills off-road. That range will probably get cut significantly. In terms of off-road capability, which is another thing they're really trying to stress here, and again in a slightly laughable way, it appears to have lots of off-road modes, but of course it remains to be seen what exactly those off-road modes do. They have other relevant things as well. So for example, the ability to lift up the car around 6 inches to clear obstacles. This is in addition to 35-inch tires, which can be expanded to 37 inches. They also purport to have underbody armor for the Hummer, which is obviously going to be helpful if you want to take it off-road. In addition to this, they purport to have some nifty steering-related technology, and that nifty steering technology comes in a few forms. Firstly, the ability to potentially drive somewhat diagonally, and this is through the crab walk mode. Now, it remains to be seen exactly how useful this is, and how diagonal it can really go, because in the mock-ups it's probably overemphasizing it. But that could be a useful feature even in everyday traffic, particularly when dealing with parking and the like. So in terms of that, that's a useful steering technology. Rear-wheel steering also appears to be there. So it looks like they're going to have a decent amount of technology to help with performance. This is in addition to the camber angles that you can view. So it looks like it will actually be decently practical, at least taken off-road. However, it remains to be seen whether it really works well in the city, given the sheer size of it. If we're looking at things like comfort, it appears to have decent levels of comfort, but it's a little bit iffy here. So what we're seeing internally is basically early models and mock-ups of it. The internals look nice, But again, that's subject to change. So they look nice, but we don't really know what the materials are going to be like. And GM materials can sometimes be a little bit iffy, is the best way of putting it. But Hummers have generally been a leading model, so they might go out of their way to make them better. In terms of the technology internally, it looks like it will be quite decent, but again, we're looking at GM technology. So in terms of the screens and the like, it appears to have large screens, which is what you would expect of a car at the moment. That's ordinary. Most cars have that type of thing. So it appears to have at least adequate internal technology from a comfort type standpoint. Most of the technology so far appears to be focused primarily on performance and off-road capability, but it does appear they've tried to make it reasonably user-friendly from a day-to-day basis. In terms of other comfort-related things, we're basically looking at some other things in terms of niceties. So for example, the ability to remove the roof, have a transparent roof, and the like, if you really want to do that. I can see some people liking that. I can see some people finding it totally useless, particularly in hot environments. I have no idea why you'd even want that, but it's there as an option if you'd like it. Maybe it's useful at night, but let's face it, if you're driving this in the outback in Australia, you probably won't want the roof off because that would be torturously hot and painful. Still, it's an option that it appears you can do. Whether or not this is an additional expense is not totally clear at this stage. Also, in terms of actual storage space, that's not totally clear at this stage either. In terms of aesthetics, I think it looks reasonably nice. However, it does verge on the slightly generic, is probably the best way of putting it. While the somewhat iconic Hummer grille is there, and you can see this in terms of the lights at the front, and this is also emphasized through the charging lights, which to my mind are actually a little bit gimmicky, but still some people might like them. The iconic look is there, but to my mind it reminds me a bit of the Jeeps and a bit of the Jeep Grand Wagoneer in terms of the front. It's significantly better than the Jeeps, but still it's looking a little bit generic, or at least it's getting toward that. And I'm not a super fan of the front. It's not awful, I just don't really like it. And in many ways I actually preferred the old front, but I also like the aesthetics of the LM002, so maybe I'm just totally deluded. In any case, I think it looks nice enough, but not particularly interesting is the best way of putting it. So that's my views on it. I think the performance looks like it could be quite capable. It sounds promising with the 1000 horsepower. It sounds promising with the sheer amount of torque that it has, 11,500. The acceleration time sounds good, particularly since this vehicle looks incredibly heavy. It also seems to have some really useful technology for off-roading, which might also create additional benefits for inner city driving when those particularly are pertaining to steering, like rear wheel steering, to an extent the diagonal steering. So those could be benefits that will also be portable to inner city driving, which might be useful and might be attractive, and might help to offset the sheer size of the vehicle, which honestly does look kind of massive, particularly with the 35-inch up to 37-inch tires. So it looks like it could be promising. However, I sincerely expect that the 350 miles of range will drop significantly if you're doing serious off-roading with it, or if you're just doing, say, drag races with it, in that 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. I suspect that 350 mile range is not really going to be there in practical terms when you're off-roading, or when you're hauling a lot of stuff, or when you're accelerating a lot, but it does look promising. And it could certainly be quite a decent amount of competition for Tesla's Cybertruck when it eventually comes out, and for any of the other potential competitors that might emerge in this segment, particularly for those who are looking for high-performance cars in this segment. That said, it isn't cheap, and it appears it's going to cost over $100,000 US, so whether or not it really competes with the Cybertruck or is effectively pricing itself into another market segment is another issue that will come up, and it really needs to do better than the Cybertruck if it's going to be priced more. So those are my views on this recently announced Hummer EV. I think it's promising. It has a lot that I really like about it, but there are some unanswered questions. And I think that maybe the slightly laughable announcement video, maybe in some ways it gets a lot of eyeballs on the car, but it is a little bit hilarious actually watching it. So I'd encourage you to watch that with the voiceover, because I think it would actually be laugh out loud funny, or at least it was to me. In any case, thanks a lot for listening to me. I hope this has given you some insight into the Hummer EV, and I hope you found the video interesting or somewhat useful. And if you have, it would be brilliant if you click the like and subscribe buttons, or if you have any thoughts on the Hummer EV, drop those in the comments below. In any case, it would be brilliant if you share the video, because that of course is the best way to help out any channels. So thanks so much for listening in, and I very much hope to see you for future videos.